This video is fictional and for entertainment purposes only. No official reports confirm this event as fact. The courtroom was silent, not quiet, silent, not a murmur, not a footstep, not even the scratch of a journalist's pen. It was like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Every eye was locked on the man seated at the defense table, Sean "Diddy" Combs, whose once composed posture had dissolved into visible panic. The moment Michael Jackson's voice came through the speakers, something inside him cracked. The recording started without warning. No music, no fade-in, just a crisp, unfiltered voice. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone, and that's not an accident. The tone was unmistakable, haunted, clear, and undeniably Michael. For a moment, even the judge seemed stunned. Diddy's face went pale. He blinked hard, then again, then stared at the speakers like he was watching a ghost crawl out of them. His lips parted, then tightened. He shifted in his seat, leaned forward slightly, then back. A defense attorney whispered something to him, but he didn't react. His eyes were fixed on the floor now, unmoving. Then Michael said his name. "I was at that party because Sean invited me. I left after 20 minutes. The moment those words left the speaker, Diddy's mask shattered. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted toward the jury. His hand gripped the edge of the table so tightly that the veins in his forearm bulged. Across the courtroom, someone gasped. It wasn't just the shock of hearing Michael speak. It was what he was saying and who he was saying it about. Reporters stopped typing. Phones slipped from hands. Even seasoned court veterans looked shaken. What they were hearing wasn't rumor. It wasn't tabloid. It wasn't hearsay. It was Michael Jackson from beyond the grave, implicating the most powerful man in hip-hop. And then came the outburst. "That's a lie," Diddy barked, standing up so violently that his chair screeched across the floor. The court security flinched. 2 guards stepped forward. A prosecutor turned around, calmly watching. The judge banged his gavel. "Mr. Combs, control yourself," he warned. But Diddy didn't sit. He pointed at the speaker system, rage boiling over. "Turn it off. That's not real. He's dead. He's dead." Gasps echoed through the room. Someone in the gallery cried out. A woman in the second row began to sob. One juror covered his mouth. Another stared at Diddy, unblinking. The judge slammed the gavel again, harder. "Order!" The voice from the speaker kept playing. "He told me if I ever said anything, I'd regret it. But if something happens to me, let this be heard." And in that moment, something changed, not just in the courtroom, but in the trial itself. Diddy didn't just lose his composure. He lost the illusion. His confidence, his power, his years of denial, all of it cracked in front of the jury. And there, in the center of the storm, Michael's voice kept going, calm, unstoppable, like a ghost that had waited years to speak. Day 4 of the trial didn't start like the others. It vibrated with tension. By 7 a.m., journalists were already lining up outside the courthouse, whispering about something big. Even the courtroom staff seemed different that morning, tighter-lipped, brisk, slightly on edge. It wasn't just anticipation, it was fear. Fear of what was coming. By 8:15, every seat in the gallery was claimed. Celebrities who had snuck in through side doors the previous days arrived even earlier today, dressed more conservatively, more carefully. Nobody wanted to be seen smiling. Nobody wanted to be caught on camera reacting the wrong way. Something was different. The first sign? Security. There were usually 2 guards near the defendant's table. Today there were 6. 2 flanked each side of the gallery doors, one by the jury box and one standing directly behind Diddy's chair. Then came the moment Diddy entered the courtroom. He walked in like nothing had changed. As always, he wore a custom-tailored suit, dark charcoal with a thin pinstripe, crisp white shirt, no tie. He gave a nod to someone in the gallery, flashed the faintest grin, and took his seat like a man used to being in control. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. His team huddled quickly around him. Papers shuffled, strategy murmured. A young paralegal adjusted the mic in front of him, her hands trembling slightly. She knew something. She felt it too. The prosecution's table was a different story. No small talk, no fidgeting, just focus. They'd brought new equipment, a discreet black speaker system, a small audio mixer, and 2 cables that hadn't been used on the previous days. 2 technicians quietly connected it, barely speaking, but checking and double-checking every connection. One prosecutor whispered something to the techs, then turned and looked directly at Diddy. Not with hostility, more like anticipation. Whatever they were about to present, they believed it was nuclear. A court clerk entered and passed a sealed manila envelope to the judge. He opened it, skimmed the contents, then looked toward the prosecution's table. His brow furrowed slightly, just for a second, but enough for everyone paying attention to notice. When the judge finally called the courtroom to order, the tension was unbearable. He didn't open with the usual acknowledgments. He didn't even glance at the jury. Instead, he went straight to something unorthodox. "I want to remind all present," he said slowly, "that regardless of what is presented today, composure will be maintained. Any disruption will result in immediate removal." His eyes scanned the room. Then they settled for a moment on Diddy. Nobody breathed. The prosecution stood. Their lead attorney adjusted the microphone, looked at the jury, then at the judge. "Your Honor," she began, "the government is prepared to present a critical piece of audio evidence recently authenticated by our forensic team." She held up a small black USB drive. The courtroom froze. Diddy blinked once, his hands clenched. The prosecutor placed the drive on the AV table. Then she added the sentence that shattered the air. "This is a private studio recording made by Mr. Michael Jackson, dated June 2009, less than 3 weeks before his death." Everything stopped. You could feel it in the floor. Day 4 had begun, but nothing would ever be the same again. The judge gave a slight nod, signaling for the prosecution to proceed. A technician stepped forward and connected the USB drive to the courtroom's speaker system. Everyone's eyes were locked on that single blinking light, waiting for it to go solid. Diddy's legal team leaned in, whispering furiously. One of his attorneys gestured toward the judge, clearly preparing another objection, but then stopped. Too late. The prosecutor didn't say another word. She simply pressed play. At first, there was nothing. A faint crackle. Then, his voice. Michael Jackson. It was unmistakable, crystal clear, soft but deliberate, fragile but anchored in something deeper. Fear. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then something went wrong." No music, no theatrics, just him, unfiltered and terrified. The entire courtroom leaned forward as one. Diddy didn't move, but his expression did. His brow twitched, his shoulders tensed, his fingers, which had been resting on the table, curled into fists. Michael continued, his words slow and careful, like he knew exactly what he was doing. "There are people in this industry who are protected, not by talent, not by truth, but by power. I've seen them. I've been in their homes." He paused, took a breath, and then, "Sean Combs is one of them." A ripple tore through the room. Reporters stared at each other, stunned. One man in the back row dropped his pen. A woman near the jury gasped audibly. One juror blinked several times, visibly shaken. But all eyes eventually landed on Diddy. He didn't react, not yet, but his jaw clenched harder. A vein in his neck pulsed. His attorneys exchanged worried glances. Michael's voice pressed on. "I went to a party in 2007. I was invited by someone I trusted. But what I saw, what I was shown, wasn't entertainment." He named the location, a private estate in Holmby Hills. He described the lighting, the way guests were separated, the cameras mounted in the corners of the rooms. Diddy shifted slightly in his chair, then leaned back as if trying to distance himself physically from the sound. Michael's voice was steady now. "I left early. I didn't feel safe." Another pause, and then, "He told me not to talk. That it was just industry fun, but I knew it wasn't. I knew what it was." Diddy rubbed his temple. One of his lawyers passed him a folded note. He didn't look at it. The prosecution let the tape play uninterrupted. Michael began describing the aftermath, how he received threatening messages, how his security team found GPS trackers under his car, how he was advised to stay quiet if he valued his children's safety. "I've been afraid to say this," he said, "but I have to leave this somewhere, just in case." Then came the date. June 4th, 2009. Diddy's hands were now trembling on the table. He stared straight ahead, his pupils wide, chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. No one in the courtroom blinked. Everyone was frozen, suspended in the moment. Then Michael's voice changed. It dropped half an octave, became almost a whisper. I know what I saw. I know what he did. And if you're hearing this, please don't let him bury it. At that moment, Diddy closed his eyes and exhaled. Long, slow, as if bracing for impact. He knew what was coming next. The prosecution had just detonated the bomb, and Michael Jackson's voice was the trigger. The courtroom had become a vault, silent, tense, breathless. But that silence shattered the moment Michael said Diddy's name again. I saw Sean upstairs. He wasn't surprised to see me. He smiled. Then he told me I wasn't supposed to be in that part of the house. Diddy flinched, subtle but real. He gripped the arms of his chair. One of his attorneys placed a firm hand on his shoulder, the universal courtroom gesture for breathe. Michael's voice carried on, calm and chilling. He had a room, not big, but hidden. There was a girl crying. I didn't know how young she was. I walked out. A wave of murmurs swept through the gallery before the judge snapped, "Silence!" Diddy's lawyers began furiously writing notes. The second chair attorney reached for a legal pad and scribbled something in all caps before sliding it across the table to the lead counsel. The note read, "Move to strike now," but they didn't get the chance. Michael's next words sent a chill through every spine in the room. After that night, I told him I was done. I didn't want any part of it. He looked at me and said, "You're Michael Jackson. You don't want to find out how fast we can make the world forget you." The room erupted, gasps, whispers, even a stifled sob from the gallery. Reporters couldn't type fast enough. Phones vibrated from a dozen pockets as updates were rushed to waiting newsrooms. But at the defense table, Diddy broke. He didn't speak, not yet, but his body betrayed him. His hands started to tremble uncontrollably. He wiped his palms on his pants. Then again. He looked around, at the jury, the judge, even the press pool, like he was suddenly aware he was trapped. Michael's voice pressed forward with surgical precision. Look at the records. Look at the flights. Look who was there. Look who flew in that weekend. And then he did the unthinkable. He started naming names. One by one, Michael listed people who had previously claimed never to have attended Diddy's private parties. He named artists, executives, athletes, A-list names. People the press had long speculated about but never confirmed. He listed dates, cities, private jet tail numbers. One juror's pen actually stopped moving mid-note. Then calmly, almost like reading a diary, he described an event from May 23rd, 2009. He detailed the house layout, described the people in the kitchen, said who was upstairs and what was being done behind a locked door. Diddy's breathing grew uneven. His shoulders twitched every time Michael said, "he." Then Michael said one more thing. I tried to warn him. I told him this was going to come back. I said, "You can't do this to people and think it won't come back." He laughed, said the only thing that would ever stop him was death. And then Diddy snapped. "That's a lie," he roared, standing up so fast his chair slammed backward. "He's lying. He's dead. He can't say this." The courtroom went into chaos. One juror dropped their pen. Another put their hand to their mouth. The judge slammed the gavel. "Order, order!" Diddy's attorneys tried to pull him down, one of them whispering furiously into his ear. But he wasn't listening. His eyes were wild. His voice echoed again. "That never happened. He wasn't even there." The judge's voice thundered. "Mr. Combs, sit down immediately or I will hold you in contempt." Diddy froze. He looked around the courtroom, suddenly realizing what he had just done. And in that instant, it didn't matter what Michael said next. Because the jury had just seen the one thing Diddy never wanted them to see: fear, raw, exposed and real. The moment Diddy sat back down, the damage was done. The courtroom was no longer just watching a trial. They were watching a collapse. His attorney leaned in, whispering rapidly, probably urging him to breathe, to stay calm, to remember the jury was still watching. But Diddy didn't hear it. His eyes were glassy. His hand trembled as he reached for a glass of water, knocking it over instead. The water spilled across the polished defense table and soaked a stack of legal notes. No one reached to clean it. For the first time since the trial began, Sean Combs looked small. The judge adjusted his robe, glaring over the rim of his glasses. "Mr. Combs, any further disruptions, and I will have you removed from this courtroom. Do I make myself clear?" Diddy nodded once, barely perceptible. But even as the judge spoke, Michael's voice resumed, steady, deliberate, unshaken by the chaos it had just caused. "I didn't want to make this recording," Michael said. "I hoped I wouldn't need it, but every time I said I wanted out, I felt something watching me." He took a long breath. You could hear it in the room. His breath. That intimate detail made the moment feel even more surreal. It was like Michael wasn't gone at all. "Sometimes," he continued, "I'd see people I didn't recognize following me. Cars I didn't remember seeing before. I got calls with no one on the line, just silence." And then he dropped the hammer. "There's money changing hands, a lot of it, to keep people quiet. I know because I've seen the receipts." Gas returned to the room. The prosecution didn't flinch. They knew it was coming. They'd planned every moment, but the defense team looked blindsided. One of Diddy's lawyers pulled out a binder and flipped to a marked section, whispering loudly to the others. Their body language betrayed one thing: panic. Michael began listing amounts. $2 million to a girl from New Jersey, $1.3 million to a dancer from Miami, another $1 million to a boy who was underage when I saw him at one of the parties. The numbers matched bank records the jury had already seen earlier in the week. The prosecution had displayed them, unassuming and technical, until now. Now they had a voice, a witness, a source. "Michael." Diddy began rocking gently in his seat, not enough to call attention, just enough to signal his unraveling. His suit, once perfectly pressed, was damp with sweat under the arms. His posture had deteriorated from boardroom confidence to full-body tension. Michael's tone shifted again, now lower, like he was speaking directly to someone he feared. "You can tell the press whatever you want," he said. "You can tell your lawyers what to say, but you can't bury everything. Not all of it. Eventually, someone's going to hear this. And when they do, you're done." Diddy stared at the table. Didn't move, didn't blink. His lawyers began shifting strategies in real time. No more notes, no more planning. Now they were just trying to steady him, keep him together in front of the jury. But it was too late. The jury had seen what they needed to see. The cool, confident mogul was gone. In his place sat a man unraveling, visibly, irreparably, as a ghost told the world his secrets. The prosecutor didn't even try to hide her pacing. Every word Michael spoke reinforced the story the prosecution had been quietly building all week. Witness by witness, document by document, now voice by voice. And the jury listened, not just with interest, but with disbelief, with intensity, with a sense that history was happening in front of them. A courtroom sketch artist, seated behind the bar, later told reporters, "I stopped drawing. I was just watching him fall apart." The prosecutor glanced toward the defense table just once. Diddy didn't look up. He couldn't. He was no longer the man on top of the world. He was the man who just got named in a recording by the most famous voice in pop history. And that voice wouldn't stop talking. The courtroom remained frozen, as if time itself had paused around Michael's voice. The defense, stunned and visibly rattled, huddled together like a team mid-crisis. The lead attorney stood and raised a trembling hand. "Your Honor," he began, his voice noticeably less steady than earlier in the week. "We move to immediately exclude the contents of that recording from the record. The provenance and authenticity?" The judge didn't even let him finish. "Motion denied," he said flatly. "The court has already ruled on the admissibility. The jury will weigh the recording alongside the rest of the evidence." The prosecutor didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The prosecution's trap had worked, and everyone knew it. They didn't just present evidence. They staged a psychological operation, and it landed with devastating force. Diddy leaned back in his chair, slack-jawed. His skin had gone pale. He didn't even respond to the denial of the motion. He looked like a man who just lost something that couldn't be retrieved, his control, and the jury was watching every second of it. 3 of them scribbled furiously on their notepads, occasionally glancing up at Diddy's posture, his sweat-soaked collar, his trembling hands. Others stared outright. One juror whispered something to another and shook their heads slowly. The outburst, the panic, the voice. It was all burned into their memory now. The prosecution, wasting no time, shifted gears. They pulled up financial records, screenshots of wire transfers that matched Michael's voice. Same dates, same amounts, same recipients. They brought back 2 witnesses whose earlier testimony had been largely overlooked until now. Their stories lined up perfectly with what Michael had described. A text from 2009 shown on the screen. He said MJ knew too much, that he'd handle it. That line hit the courtroom like a second shockwave. Diddy sat motionless. A courtroom sketch artist quietly added darker shading under his eyes. Reporters noted how his lawyer passed him a pen, not for notes, but just to hold something, anything. His fingers gripped it like a lifeline, but he didn't write a word. He didn't ask questions. He just stared ahead, disconnected, like he was watching himself from the outside. By mid-afternoon, the mood had changed completely. The man who once swaggered into court every morning, smirking at reporters and nodding to fans, was now hunched in his chair, unable to meet the jury's gaze. The final blow of the day came just before the court adjourned. The defense filed an emergency motion, again, to exclude Michael Jackson's recording from evidence. This time, they claimed it was impossible to authenticate fully due to the deceased status of the speaker. But the courtroom saw it for what it was: desperation. The judge didn't even deliberate. Motion denied, again. As everyone packed up, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. The prosecution's table was calm, organized, even satisfied. Meanwhile, Diddy's team looked broken, flipping through binders, making urgent calls, whispering with the urgency of a legal team that had just watched their case slip through their fingers. Because it had. As the courtroom emptied that evening, the energy was electric, buzzing not just with what had happened, but with what it meant. Outside, cameras flashed like strobe lights. Reporters shouted updates into their microphones, their voices overlapping. Michael Jackson's voice, a courtroom bombshell. Diddy unravels. Within hours, news outlets around the world had the clip queued up on every channel. But inside, among the legal teams and stunned observers, the tone was different. The prosecution moved slowly, deliberately, stacking papers into neat folders, locking up the evidence cart, and exchanging brief nods. Mission accomplished. Their star witness hadn't taken the stand, hadn't raised his right hand, and couldn't be cross-examined. But he spoke louder than any of them, and from beyond the grave, he'd done what no living witness had managed to do: break Diddy. Across the aisle, the contrast couldn't have been more dramatic. Diddy's defense team didn't speak. They packed in silence. Some avoided eye contact with each other entirely. Others whispered, clearly strategizing for damage control. The lead attorney clutched his phone, pacing, his face lined with stress. And at the center of it all sat Diddy, motionless. He didn't leave with his team. He didn't even rise right away. He just sat there, elbows on the table, shoulders slumped, staring into the grain of the wood like he was trying to disappear into it. The man who once walked into court like he was the room's owner now looked like he didn't belong in it. Jurors filed out slowly, some glancing back at him as they passed. You could see it on their faces. The moment that changed everything. Not the testimony, not the text messages, not even the photographs. It was the voice. That voice. The most iconic voice in pop music, speaking plainly, fearfully, and directly about Diddy. One court reporter summed it up as she stepped into the elevator. This isn't just a bad day for the defense. This is the kind of day that ends careers. And the prosecution had planned every second of it. Sources later revealed that the recording had been verified over a span of 4 months by 3 independent forensic audio labs. Each had confirmed the file's authenticity, untampered, unaltered, and undeniably Michael Jackson. The prosecution had waited until day 4, not by accident, but by design. They had studied Diddy's legal history and psychological patterns. They knew he was most guarded at the start of a trial, but that by day 3 or 4, he began to relax. They'd waited until just the right moment to spring their trap, and it worked. Experts on cable news quickly weighed in. That outburst wasn't just emotional, one said. It was catastrophic. Jurors don't forget what they see. They don't forget fear. And now legal insiders are whispering something else, something even more chilling. That Michael's voice may not be the only one. The recording that played in court was labeled Disc 3. Disc 3. What's on Disc 1? Disc 2? How many recordings did Michael make before he died? Who else did he mention? What other truths did he leave behind, hidden in vaults, waiting for the right moment? One unnamed source close to the prosecution claims there are more tapes. And if that's true, Diddy's worst day in court might only be the beginning. As the doors to the courtroom closed and lights dimmed on day 4, the entire industry shifted. Not just because a man had lost control, but because a ghost had finally spoken, and what he said can't be unheard. Tomorrow the trial resumes. But the illusion is gone. The jury has seen the man behind the music mogul. And Michael Jackson? He just became the most powerful witness in the case.